Welcome to Alan Skorsky Reports. I'm Alan Skorsky. Since October 7th, we have witnessed the world's moral decline on the grandest scale in recent memory. On October 7th, the world woke up to Hamas Muslim Brotherhood terrorists breaking into Israel, slaughtering, butchering, gang raping, beheading, and burning alive Jewish men, women, babies, and entire families. Following that, over 250 civilians were kidnapped, tortured, and murdered, including 8-month-old Kfir Bibas, his older brother Ariel, along with their terrified mother Shiri. In a sane and moral world, there would have been an international calling for the destruction of Hamas and anyone who supported them. But we are living in a world where moral compasses no longer exist. Israel soon became the pariah, while in America, Jews became legitimate targets, and nowhere was that more prevalent than in our most elite universities. Just last week, a video of a Harvard professor went viral with him saying, "I support demonizing Jews." With us today is Itamar Marcus, founder of Palestinian Media Watch, one of the most important pro-Israel organizations in the world. Palestinian Media Watch monitors everything coming out of the Palestinian Authority and Gaza and translates their words verbatim. Just a few examples since October 7th. A quote from a top Fatah official. Hamas's October 7th massacre will be studied in universities. Terrorist prisoners are a source of pride, a precious treasure. Another top PA official, Jibril Rajoub. What Hamas did on October 7th made them part of the Palestinian national self-liberation movement. And then according to polls, it's not just Hamas, it's all Palestinians. 98% said October 7th made them proud. So Itamar, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you've got a lot to share with us. Let me begin with an opening question. You have spent your career monitoring what's coming out of the PA. You have then traveled to European parliaments, US Congress, showing them what Palestinian education looks like, leading to most of those governments, at least temporarily, suspending funding to them. But now it's a whole different world. Forget about what you're monitoring. Hamas officials themselves are making recordings, whether it's on Al Jazeera or their homemade videos they made, bragging about what they're doing. And instead of governments condemning them, saying, "We're done with you," they're empowering them. They are giving them, insulation. They're condemning Israel. I guess the nice way I can ask, what the hell happened?
Okay, well, the first thing, thank you for inviting me, Alan. The first thing I want to say is that the biggest mistake that the international community is making right now is not vis-a-vis Hamas. It's vis-a-vis thinking that the Palestinian Authority is a good alternative to Hamas. What we have seen over the last 20 more years in Palestinian Authority education and indoctrination through television programmings, through speeches, through religious lessons, is that the Palestinian Authority is the one that created the power of Hamas. Every message that makes someone turn into a terrorist was promoted by the Palestinian Authority. They're the ones who demonize Jews as the enemy of Allah. They're the ones who supply all the school books that were used by children in Judea, Samaria, West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. In other words, the entire education, the entire culture, everything was, even though Hamas was controlling Gaza, it was all run and funded by the Palestinian Authority. So the international community coming today to think that the Palestinian Authority can be an alternative after Hamas is destroyed in Gaza is an outrage. It is like it's like offering more sugar to the horse to eat.
Say it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Palestinian Authority created the power of Hamas, and if they're the ones who rule Gaza, there will be another Hamas after them. It might have a different name. It might certainly have different leaders. It might be the same PA leaders, but they are the ones who promote hatred and terrorism and anti-Semitism.
Right. So, Europe, I get, they're crazy. I mean, they have stood by and watched Palestinianism and Islamism destroy their own countries. And yet, Great Britain, France, France just recently said that they're looking to coordinate with Saudi Arabia to recognize Palestine. And these are people who have, they see what's happening in their country. Now, what's happening in America is a wake-up call for every Jew. And I used to be the biggest optimist that we were always going to be safe here, but not anymore. You have the Democrats, many of them. They're not a third French party. You had President Joe Biden himself, who for his 50 years in Washington was always considered a friend of Israel. Again, weak as far as political support goes, but always a friend. And at their convention, he said some of the Hamas protesters have a point. They were unable to condemn anti-Semitism unless it included condemning Islamophobia because it would expose some of their members. And now, when you had Democrats vying for the leadership of the party as the DNC chair, several of them said that they would have allowed Hamas supporters to speak at the DNC convention. So there's something very, very dangerous happening in play. And like you said, even if they believe that the Palestinian Authority is better, as you have pointed out, there are a million quotes from them saying that they are proud of what Hamas did. There's no shortage of evidence. It doesn't take an Itamar Marcus. I mean, it's great that you do it, but they're saying it themselves that they don't want a two-state solution. It's from the river to the sea. It's globalizing intifada. So there's a very changing dynamic that's happening around the world that to me is inexplicable at this point.
Well, I think what's happened is that the Palestinian Authority has been saying these messages like from the river to the sea for so many years. And the Democratic supporters have heard it. They've seen, same with the Europeans. They saw that there was no backlash. They saw that the United States continued to fund the Palestinian Authority for many, many years under the Democratic leadership, that these expressions became normalized. The
Right.
hatred of Israel and the hatred of Jews and the seeing Israel as this imperialist implant with no right to exist, a colonial implant with no right to exist, became normalized amongst Democrats because they heard it so many times. The other thing you have to recognize is that it's been documented and exposed the billions of dollars that has come from Qatar and Saudi Arabia and other countries into universities throughout the United States, especially the Ivy League universities, in order to create Arab affairs programs, Muslim affairs programs, Palestinian issues. They impose their own lectures. The only way students who wanted to study the Middle East, for example, and pass would have to echo the Palestinian
Right.
Authority hatred of Israel and demonization of Israel. So what's happened is all these young people in all these Ivy League schools, and now they're no longer. Now many of them are working already in Washington as assistants to
Right.
members of Congress. Some of them are going to be elected in the next few years. So this did not happen in one night. This was a brilliant invasion of American academia by the Gulf states, those same states that are being presented right now by President Trump as if they're the moderates, they're going to be the allies. They're the ones who've already conquered the universities. They're the ones who created
Correct.
all the problems that President Trump is complaining about, and now he's embracing them. So there are a lot of contradictions that are going on here, but we have to understand it didn't happen overnight. There's been
Right.
a couple of decades, if not even 3 decades, of indoctrination and poisoning of the American university mind.
Okay, so you right now you just hit something very important. I went to college 40 years ago in Detroit at Wayne State University, 20 minutes from Dearborn, Michigan. So I was in the hotbed of it all. But back then, there was no Palestinian Authority, it was the PLO. And the United States did not recognize the PLO. Not Oslo, in my opinion, opened the doors for all of this because by recognizing the Palestinian Authority as a peace partner, it didn't matter how many times they have, the pay for slay and everything else that they did. They have now, after all this time, made Palestinianism a legitimate cause because we recognize them. So that's the first thing that blew up in our faces. But what's happening at the universities, and I've said this many times, that it didn't start overnight. For years, they've had National Apartheid Week. They've had these slogans from the river to the sea going on for decades. And now again, Jewish students don't go to college to become activists. They go to meet girls, well, the guys do, and to get a college education, to become doctors, lawyers, accountants, whatever. These people come here to become student activists. Mahmoud Khalil, who's going to be deported, God willing, is in his 30s. He didn't come here for an education. He came here, and nobody has investigated, as far as I know, where all these 30-year-old students are coming here for an education. They got their degree somewhere else already, but no one's investigated who funded them to come here and start everything up.
No, you're
Like,
absolutely right. And like I said, there's been this silent invasion of the American mind, of the American campuses, and it's been successful, completely successful. When you had those interviews in Congress, those questioning in Congress of the university presidents, and they weren't willing to say that calls for genocide of Jews was absolute hate speech, should be prohibited. It just told you that that was something beyond, I think, anything that anyone could have imagined. It was worse than saying that Israel should be destroyed. It was, that is hate speech. There was going beyond that. Every Jew, genocide means what Hitler said. All of a sudden Hitler is being legitimized in the Ivy League campuses
correct.
of the United States, and it's just unimaginable. But there's a lot of work that has to be done now to the rebuilding of a healthy attitude. And one of the things that has to happen is, the United States just made all these business deals with the Gulf states, but the money that has been poured into the universities, that has to stop. And the university messages, I mean, the United States is punishing the universities, the government right now, with cutting off American funding. They have to be sure that there's not going to be more radical Islamic funding that comes in to fill the gap, because then the lack of American government funding will just open up the door for Qatar to, give some of its spare change of 100 million here, 100 million there, and you don't know what kind of tragedies will be in the future because of those mistakes today.
Right. And like you said, also with Columbia University, to me is a prime example. When I was a kid, I'm talking about, I was not even maybe a teenager at Columbia, one of the professors was Edward Said. So that shows how far back this building up, this momentum goes. And it comes from care. And here in America, we have imams and all these, whether it's California, Texas, Chicago, preaching hatred against the Jews, death to America, death to Israel. And as Americans, we're just standing by and letting it happen. We have countless. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You're going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say something about that, about the imams, because it's very interesting. A number of years ago, I was invited by the New York Bar at they were having an annual conference, and they asked me to speak, and I spoke about just this. Again, it was a legal setting. I spoke about the American laws that guarantee freedom of religion and freedom of speech, and I talked about the speech that was being expressed at that time in the Palestinian Authority. Now it's shifted over to the United States as well. But the speech that I was talking about, or the presenting of genocide of Jews as something that Allah wants, but they do it by quoting specifically religious sources. So if they're quoting a religious source, it's protected as freedom of religion, freedom of speech. But because you're saying that Allah wants it and it's in my book, it's my holy book, how can you tell me not to preach the holy book? And this is the way they were getting away with it internationally, because I saw when I was going to parliaments and I was showing what was being quoted, they'll say, well, that's part of their religious tradition. What are you going to do? Well, this now has, I think, snuck into the United States with the same warped logic that if you package the genocide of Jews as something that is part of your religion, then it has to be protected speech, because after all, you're just quoting your religion. Let me just tell you something. People in America, for the most part, and certainly the Democrats and probably many Republicans, perceive the conflict with the Palestinians, Israel-Palestinians, as a land conflict. Let me tell you, in the last few months, probably 6 months, 5 times on official Palestinian television, the religious leaders have used the following expression to end their speech. It goes as follows: Allah, count the Jews one by one, kill them one by one, don't leave even one. 5 times, that exact same thing. Well, okay, it's part of Islamic tradition. They're going to get away with it. Israel hasn't prosecuted these people. Israel hasn't closed off these official sermons for some incredible reason. But the point is, they are presenting it as religiously protected speech because they're quoting Islamic sources. And this is our challenge. We have to say that we have to make the world understand that if you package hate speech and just give it a tag, this is my religious belief, it can't be acceptable. It can't be acceptable when it's infringing on other people's rights to life and liberty.
And you know what's interesting about that, because you're citing religion here in America, the left and many Democrats also, they are so anti-Christian because Christian preaches morality. Christianity is pro-life. It's against adultery. I mean, basic morality, and they consider Christianity to be a threat. And yet, as you're saying now that this is packaged under religion, Islam is 10 times more the religious threat to anybody and everybody than Christianity ever could.
Yeah, when look, one of the things that I pointed out a number of times, especially recently, is that a lot of the packaging of ideology that Hitler did is now being copied by the Palestinian Authority. And it sounds like an outrageous argument, but let me just tell you something. Hitler's main point was that the Jews are the enemies of humanity. We endanger humanity. We're a threat to humanity. And therefore, killing of Jews is actually a service to humanity. Well, this is the identical message that has been coming from the Palestinian Authority for a number of years now, from the top, even from people like Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas on television in a speech a year ago said that the Europeans hated the Jews and Hitler hated the Jews, and they fought the Jews because they were bringing ruin. He said Hitler killed the Jews because he thought they were bringing ruin. In another speech before that, he talked about the Jews were massacred all throughout Europe since the Middle Ages. And why were they massacred? He said, because they were, not because they were Jews, but because they were a danger to society, because of their social role, because of interest that they were taking, because of and other reasons. In other words, anti-Semitism was brought, the Jews created anti-Semitism. Had the Jews been good citizens, there would have been no anti-Semitism. The Jews were evil citizens. They brought anti-Semitism on their own. And that's why they were hated. There was an outrageous official on Palestinian television a few months after October 7th. And he was trying to explain why so many countries had expressed sympathy to Israel after October 7th. And what he said was, these countries all succeeded in getting rid of their human waste, the Jews, by sending them to Palestine. And they're afraid if Israel is weak now, the human waste will go back to Europe. There'll be a reverse migration. And that's the reason why these countries are supporting Israel.
So I remember that quote. Did that come from your information? Because I did see that.
Absolutely. Yes, that came from Palestinian Media Watch. And just before those statements, there was one guy who was interviewed on Palestinian Authority TV, and he explained that that Jews had no history in the land, and the reason why Israel exists as a state is because the Jews' evil behavior, because the Jews lived by the protocols of the elders of Zion, because of all these things, the Europeans decided to create a state in order to get rid of them. In other words, according to Palestinian ideology, Israel exists as a dumping ground for the West, was created by the West to get rid of their Jews, and then the Palestinians take it one step further. Well, the whole world suffered from the Jews, and they created a dumping ground in Palestine, but that doesn't solve all problem. We shouldn't suffer, because then therefore comes in Islam and says, now that they're in one place together, it's going to be easy for you to exterminate the Jews. This is Palestinian Authority Islam. And when I say as an ideology, it's identical to the messages of Hitler. The Jews are a threat, therefore they have to be exterminated for the benefit of humanity. That's what we're getting from the Palestinian Authority. The same Palestinian Authority that Macron from France and many in the West want to give statehood now beside Israel.
اليهود لأنهم يهود لا يحارب هؤلاء الناس بسبب وظيفتهم الاجتماعية. حتى هتلر يعني حارب اليهود لأنهم كانوا يعملون على أساس الربا والمال، يعني يخربون من وجهة نظره هذا، ولذلك هو يكرهه.
Okay.
قالوا إن هتلر.
Okay, there you got it from the one from Hitler. But let me show you just another one of these here. Hang on one second, please. Here. I'll just show you another one. You can blend them in afterward.
Sure.
اليهود في طبعهم أنهم متعالين، أوروبيون كرهوهم وأرادوا التخلص منهم، فكانت إحدى مصالح الدول الأوروبية فكرة قامت دولة لليهود، وفكرهم قائم على عنصرية جعلتهم مكروهين في أي مكان. في بروتوكولات حكماء صهيون قالوا أن الله خلق الأرض ثم خلق البشر ليمهدوا لهم الأرض ثم خلقهم ليكونوا أسيادا عليهم.
Okay, let me just give you one more here.
Right.
Here. Three of the ones that I mentioned already.
وإنما هم يعني كأوروبا وأمريكا استطاعوا التخلص من اليهود الذين هم أنفسهم يعتبرونهم نفايات بشرية، وألقوا بهم في فلسطين، يعني أوجدوا لهم مكان بعيدا عنهم، بعيدا عن أوروبا. لا يريدون الآن هجرة معاكسة وعودة هؤلاء.
Okay, they don't want a reverse migration today.
Right.
There you have
Yeah.
3 examples, and this is all coming from the official television station of the Palestinian Authority, and they repeated by so many different people, and these are all recent expressions of this. Like I said, Mahmoud Abbas has said the same thing 3 different times in different ways. Everyone wants to get rid of the Jews. The Jews are the world's problem. By the way, what's so interesting also, people think of Hitler as completely secular, and of course he was in no way a religious person. However, in Mein Kampf, he wrote, "When I defend myself against the Jews, I'm doing the work of the Lord." That's what he said. That's what he wrote. Right. And there are 2 things here that parallel the Palestinian Authority. I defend myself. Hitler said when he fought the Jews, it's self-defense. That's what we see from the Palestinian Authority. It's self-defense to fight against the Jews. And the Palestinians, of course, say it's from Allah. This is what he wants. And Hitler said, I'm doing it also for God. So these are tragic parallels in terms of ideology. The reason why 98% of Palestinians were proud a month and a half after October 7th, when they were asked, are all these events, are you proud of what's going on, since October 7th? And 98% said yes, it was because of this. They felt the Palestinian population is very religious. They know the Jews. They've been taught the Jews are the evil people in the world. They know that they have a responsibility to get rid of the Jews. Hamas had just massacred 1,200 and degraded them, tortured them, raped them. This has humiliated them. This for them was proving that their Allah was right. This for them, and that's why they were proud. They were proud because they were the ones who were doing this for Allah. And that's, of course, the tragedy of the people we're dealing with today. Still today, over 70% of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria think, and the latest polls think, that what happened on October 7th was the right thing to do. The right thing to do. So when you've got the supposedly moderate Judea Samaria Arabs that are under the Palestinian Authority, 70% saying that it was the right thing to do, you know that there's not only is the leadership a problem, but the leadership has poisoned the people. We can't live and give these people a state because they're going to elect a Hamas the minute they have a state. The people believe in Hamas. And I'll even go further. 71% say it was the right thing to do. And based on the fact that 98% were proud, I think those 30% that are missing there, or the 28% that are missing, it's not because they think it was wrong morally, ethically. They think it was just caused too much damage, and therefore it wasn't the right thing to do. 71% are saying even with the destruction of half of Gaza, and even with the killing of thousands of civilians who were being used as human shields, it was still the right thing to do. And that's the outrage, and that's what we have to realize. This is the Palestinian population. We get these myths, and you get these sometimes American leaders who say the Palestinian people are not the problem. It's a few bad leaders. By now, tragically, they have poisoned the entire Palestinian population, and we need, before we even can consider talking about statehood on any part of Judea and Samaria for the Palestinian Arabs, before we can even consider that, we need at least a generation of detoxification.
Right.
detoxification of these Palestinians. And then when we see that they recognize Israel's right to exist, they recognize Israel's neighbor, then we can decide which areas where they happen to be living that we can create some kind of an administration for them. But let's not even dream of giving these people, which like I say, who dream of our destruction day and night, giving them a state.
Yeah. So you mentioned the indoctrination. So I think you know that, and I've read her book, A Not Wilf, talked about the history of UNRWA going back to 48, how they indoctrinated these people to believe that they are victims against the Jews. And what we saw over the last 2 years, since October 7th, you had World Central Kitchen, Doctors Without Borders, and Human Rights Watch. And there's never been an investigation into these groups because nobody goes into Gaza. They don't go into an area dominated by Hamas out of the goodness of their hearts because they just want to help poor people. They have an agenda. Doctors Without Borders, if they're working in Gaza hospitals, then there's no way in hell that they didn't know that Hamas is using it to hide their weapons. And yet, UNRWA has been kind of called to the carpet, but the Red Cross, World Central Kitchen, and especially Doctors Without Borders, who to me are the worst because these are doctors. And they're the ones who are protecting Hamas. I guarantee you that not one doctor without border asked anybody in their area, do you know where any of the hostages are? They're not there. They are giving cover because by them being there, it makes it harder for Israel to operate because then Israel can be accused of targeting ambulances and healthcare workers.
Now, let me tell you something else interesting about the Red Cross. You mentioned earlier the pay for slay. Pay for slay is something that Palestinian Media Watch uncovered a number of years ago. Palestinian Authority pays salaries to every terrorist in prison, terrorist murderers, terrorists who sent suicide bombers, who killed dozens. For example, Abdallah Barghouti, he's serving 67 life sentences for building the bombs that killed 67 people. Abdallah Barghouti. Well, Abdallah Barghouti has received salary of over $200,000 already. Now, the only way he can get that salary, and it's written in Palestinian Authority regulations, is if a lawyer or a Red Cross representative comes to him and has him sign a power of attorney so that somebody can open up a bank account for him on the outside where he can get his money. So the Red Cross is actually facilitating the Palestinian terrorists getting their salaries. Now, that is an outrage. It's even more than that. The terrorists who are still on trial and haven't been convicted yet, they need to have their forms updated every 3 months, every 4 months. And they go to the Red Cross every 4 months to have them updated so they're to be able to get their salaries. So the Red Cross is playing a central role written into Palestinian Authority law for the Palestinian terrorists to get their salaries.
Sorry. Okay. You good? Okay, I paused it. Okay, so let me ask you a question now. We all read I guess from Israeli media that Hamas sent their representatives to Doha because there's another offer on the table that they might grab as a result of Israel pushing forward the new ground operation. When all of this is said and done, where do you see things going?
Ideally, look, there's it all depends on if Donald Trump gives Israel the free hand to do what must be done. Right now, we are putting so much military pressure on the Hamas population, on the Hamas leadership, wiping them out one by one, all of the leaders, that if Israel is enabled to continue this military pressure for even a couple more weeks, I believe that there will be eventually a surrender of the Hamas fighters. When they see that all the leadership has been killed, and we killed Sinwar's brother, and possibly a second brother was also in serious condition. The leaders, one by one, wherever they're hiding, they're not even together. We get them wherever they are. I think at a certain point, the Hamas fighters are going to say, what the hell am I going to do this for? I'm just going to wait to be killed by Israel.
Right.
That's my hope. There'll be a massive surrender at a certain point. And then Israel will have to create some kind of a military control of the area completely under Israeli military because we can't trust anyone. We can't trust the Egyptians who allowed dozens of tunnels from Egypt, Sinai into Gaza that enabled the building and enabled the arming of Hamas. It's just unbelievable. Egypt is supposedly an ally of the United States, an ally of Israel against terror, and they're the ones who are facilitating. They're the ones who enabled this. So this is critical that Israel has to be completely in control militarily, and then Gaza, which is already not livable for the majority of the Gazans, to do the population a favor, they should really be transported out. And I just want to point out something. This is not an expulsion. Palestinian Media Watch reported on polls that were taken literally a month before October 7th. And even then, over 50% of the Palestinian Gazans, young Gazans, already wanted to leave Gaza because they had no future there. This was before the Gaza was destroyed, but when there were still job possibilities. They wanted to leave. They wanted to get out. They had no future. They didn't want to live under the Palestinian Authority or under Hamas. So these people, now, if it was 50% then, today it's got to be 90%, if not 95%. Enable these people to go. There's talk now about possibly 1 million going to Libya. Egypt and Jordan have some room, lots of room, Egypt in particular. Do these people a favor, give them a future, and then something positive can be done with Gaza. As Israel had done with it. When Israel was living there, we had made it into a beautiful, when Israel was controlling Gaza after the Six-Day War, I think close to 30% of Gaza was Israelis were living, close to 30% of Gaza. And they made it into a wonderland, and that can be repeated. And I think that's the ideal situation, both for Israel, will never have a threat from Gaza anymore, and for the Palestinian population, they will have the ability to create good lives for themselves someplace else. What will hurt is Palestinianism, which is a fictitious ideology that was imposed on this population of Arabs living in the land of Israel. That will be dealt a serious blow, and that'll be for the good of everyone. For everyone's benefit. Palestinianism has been terrible for Israelis, and it has even been a disaster for the Arabs who were told, guess what? You are now Palestinians, and therefore you have to fight to destroy Israel.
Itamar, Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, everything you contribute, it's, you get, I said this before, the work that you do and your organization does is one of the most important organizations in the world today. And I always encourage people to subscribe to Palestinian Media Watch. What is the URL to subscribe?
Yeah, so our website is palwatch.org. And from there, you can also see you should follow us on Twitter and on Facebook, etc. And you can get all this information as it's coming out.
Thank you so much, Itamar. All the best.